Good afternoon. This is Quintus Curtius, and the subject of this podcast is going to be how to inspire people with hope. How to inspire people with hope. And these are just a few things I've learned in the past 25 years in the practice of law, and maybe even before that when I was an officer and dealing with people. And it involves situations where someone is a client or someone that you're in charge of is in a very desperate situation, very dire straits, and they really don't have a lot to look forward to, or there's just not a lot of hope for their situation. In those situations, it's your responsibility to give them hope. It's your responsibility to carry them across the finish line in the best way you can. And sometimes when you don't have a lot to work with, if someone's situation is very dire, and what I mean by that, let's say you've got a client, they got fired, they haven't worked in a year, they're facing eviction or collections activities from creditors, they're being hounded, their car is getting repossessed, their house is getting foreclosed on, whatever. Bad things are all happening all at once. That's the gist of it. And sometimes you have to be a mind doctor. And I learned this just over the years where when situations come up and there really isn't a lot to work with and you don't really see a lot of good outcomes on the immediate horizon, you have to be a mind doctor. You have to treat the patient sometimes even with placebos rather than with medicines that may not exist. You may not have specific medicines for the ailments that are afflicting them. So you have to be a mind doctor, and the mind, in many ways, can be just as important as the body, maybe even more important when it comes to curing problems. So let's talk about a few of these techniques that I've picked up over the years. The first one is listen. Listen. You've got to be a listener. Now, you might think that this is common sense and this is something that doesn't need to be said, but it does need to be said because when someone is in dire straits, when someone is really hurting and in a very, very bad position, they know they're in a bad position. Even if they're crying and carrying on and throwing hissy fits or tantrums or whatever, or extremely depressed, okay, excuse me, if they're having problems, they know they're having problems. They don't need you to tell them that. What they do want you to do is listen. You've got to be a listener. And what that means is shutting your mouth, letting them tell their story, letting them grieve, letting them get the pain off their chest without interrupting, without asking a lot of stupid questions, and just being kind of a shoulder to cry on. Sometimes you have to do that. They don't expect you to find and wave a magic wand and find immediate solutions to problems. People are not crazy. They know that sometimes things are going to take a long, long time to heal. But they do expect you to listen. And you'd be very surprised at how far that can go if you become a very good listener, if you develop that skill. And what are the specific skills of being a listener? Well, first of all, you've got to shut up and let them do the talking. And I think what you can do also is you can ask questions. You can ask questions. That brings me to the second point. Besides being a good listener, you need to ask people questions. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that you hit them with a whole bunch of laundry list of stupid questions. What it means is while they are getting things off their chest, you should try to ask leading questions. If they're going on and on about how they just lost their job, or they haven't worked in a year, or they say their car is about to get repossessed, or whatever misfortune has befallen them, whatever it is, whatever situation, you can ask a leading question like, well, tell me a little bit about that. What specifically is happening? What's the make and model of the car? Did you get the collection notice in the mail yet? What does it say? Can you read it off to me? Ask questions. And you may think that again, that is, oh, what is that going to do? How is that going to help? Well, the very act of going through an iteration of answering questions can be soothing to the person. The very act of undertaking some sort of action can be soothing. You know, I think there was a movie once. I remember along those lines. There was a movie called The Edge. It came out in the mid '90s. I think 1996 or '97. I think. Very good movie. You should see it. It's Anthony Hopkins is in it. Um, you've got Alec Baldwin is in it. Very very good movie. Elle McPherson, the model, is in it as well. And there's a scene where these guys are lost in the woods, and the Anthony Hopkins character tells one of the other characters to. He's like, "What do I do? What are we going to do? How are we going to get out of here? What's going on?" He tells him, "Find a flat." I think he says something like, "Find a flat stone and spit on it," or something like that. And the other character laughs at it and says, "Well, why did you tell him something ridiculous to do that?" Well, he says, "Well, because just by the very act of hunting for a flat stone uh, is going to divert his mind from the stresses of the moment and get him or her back into some sort of restored mindset, some better mind frame." Anyway, the point is by asking questions, you can help diffuse the situation. You can really help diffuse someone who is suffering from anxiety, someone who is distressed. Again, when people are distressed, it's your job to be the diffuser of the uh, distress grenade. Okay, it's your job to try to stop that. And if you're the type of person who's a callous and apathetic, and you don't know how to deal with people, you don't know how to talk to people, you know, people are going to take note of that, and you're not going to be as effective as you could be. These are human relation skills that you need to develop. All right, so the third technique. Okay, so the first two, again, to recap: listening, number one; asking questions, number two; number three, this is a favorite of mine, and I developed this one a long time ago, and I found that it really, really works. And this is set a check back date. What that means is when someone is unloading their story on you of woe and tragedy, you go through, you listen, you ask questions, you provide solutions and suggestions and remedies. But what you also do is you give them a date to check back in with you. You say, "Look, okay, this is great. This is what I think you should do. Blah 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 blah. Call me, check back in with me next week, next Friday, this same time, and let me know how things are going." That what that does is that gives them something to look forward to. That gives them something to focus on, something to look forward to. It lets them know that they still retain a degree of contact with you, that you're still tasking them to do something, and you're revalidating the connection they have to you, the attorney-client connection or the leader-follower connection or whatever, worker, co-worker connection, whatever you want to call it. I really like this technique because it really works. It works very, very well. It shows that you care. It shows that you're engaged. It sets a specific future date, and it helps to, I think, soothe the anxieties of the mind for a certain time. Now, you don't want to set the check back in date too far out. You don't want to say, "Oh, call me back next month." Or I think about a week or so is a good time frame to shoot for. So think about that. And finally, the fourth technique is be willing to offer something. Be willing to make some sort of concession to your person. In other words, let's say you're an attorney and you've quoted somebody a price to do something, and they're having problems. They can't come up with the money, or they're in a real hardship situation. Offer them a deal. Say, "Look, I'll work with you. I'm not going to abandon you. You know, see how much you can put together, and then call me back next week, and let's see where you're at. I'm willing to, say, look, I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing to discount things because you're in a hardship. I'm willing to give you a deal we can sort of renegotiate that if you're having a real problem. That lets people know that you care, that you're not a hard-hearted bastard, that not everything is about dollars and cents, and that you're willing to work with them and make concessions. You've got to give people something. You can't just refuse to budge. Now that again, you got to be careful, and it takes experience. You got to know. I'm not saying you should do that when someone is, somebody does have the ability to pay, and the price is fair and they should pay. And I'm not saying that you should denigrate or devalue your own services. I'm not saying that at all. But over time, after you've been in the game, after you've been in the job for many, many years, you'll be able to tell when someone truly has a hardship and when someone is just trying to hustle you, when someone is just trying to maybe bargain with you and try to shave off something off a legitimate price or whatever. You'll be able to know the difference. I'm talking about situations where somebody really needs a break. And you've got to be willing to do that. You can't be such a cold-hearted bastard that you're just going to say, no, that's it, there it is, goodbye, because I think that's not a good approach either. So with these techniques, in my view, you can really, really buttress someone's morale, and you can really restore confidence, or you can restore hope to someone who's in a very, very bad situation, and you can get them back on their feet, get them moving, tell them to keep moving. You've got to be an inspirer. You've got to be able to deliver this inspiration and carry people across the finish line who don't think they can get across the finish line. You've got to do it. If you don't do it, nobody else will. And to recap, again, number 1, listen. Number 2, ask questions. Number 3, set a date for checking back in with people. And 4, be willing to offer them something. And I think if you can master these techniques, if you can deploy these techniques, you will find that your skills of inspiring hope are going to be very, very well developed. All right. Until next time, I'm Quintus Curtius.